Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Confidence to Lead, Self-Doubt and Imposter Syndrome, Dealing with What's Holding You Back. My name is Naomi Dixon and I'm the Membership Coordinator for the Society for Education and Training. We're a membership body dedicated to professionals working across further education, vocational teaching and training, and we're part of the Education and Training Foundation, the ETF. This is the third of 3 ETF webinars for aspiring leaders who want to apply for leadership positions and develop a stronger leadership presence. This webinar will specifically explore how self-doubt and imposter syndrome impacts on how we fulfill our leadership potential. So today we're aiming to explore how self-doubt and imposter syndrome manifests itself in the workplace and the impact it can have on our ability to be at our best and to show leadership, explore strategies and techniques for overcoming doubts and fears, identify strategies and ways to build confidence, well-being, and so we can be who we want to be, and highlight the importance of networks such as the WLN in helping us to build confidence in ourselves and in others. So today, the webinar will be presented by Kathryn James. Kathryn is a board member for the Women's Leadership Network. She's a consultant on leadership, SEND, mental health and social inclusion. Prior to this, Kathryn worked for the Education and Training Foundation, where she was responsible for commissioning and managing projects delivering leadership, management and government development opportunities. Kathryn also worked for ELSIS and the Learning and Work Institute, where she led on large national projects, reporting to government and writing policy and good practice guidelines. She's passionate about equality, diversity and inclusion strategy and implementation. She's also worked in FE as a careers advisor. So, thank you for joining us today, for listening to this webinar. Everyone who has registered to attend, will receive an on-demand recording of this webinar. So don't worry if you can't catch everything in your notes. You can re-watch it again at in your own time and around your busy schedule. As we said before, this is one of 3 webinars, and all 3 of these webinars, including the first, building your personal brand, and the second, dealing with unconscious bias, will be available on the WLN website. Kathryn will share details of this. We will also be accepting attendee questions throughout, as Kathryn's with us today and can help you deal with those. So in that small box that's underneath your presentation, please do add in any questions as they come and we'll try to get to them as quickly as possible. So to begin today's webinar, I will now hand over to Kathryn James.
Okay, thank you, Naomi, and really pleased to be here and to be part of these 3 webinars. So this is an important time for the Women's Leadership Network. Just to explain and give a bit of a background, we are relaunching the WLN, so we're really pleased to be partnering with ETF around this. WLN has existed for about 35 years and it was set up to increase the number of women in senior leadership roles, mainly as principals of colleges. And to a great extent, WLN has been very successful with that. We have some amazing women leading in the sector. But it is timely, I think, for WLN to think about what gender equality and inclusion means now for the sector, what is needed to promote greater diversity and inclusion for the future. So, as I said, we're partnering with ETF and we're looking at the kind of workforce development and about how we strengthen and support that talent pipeline in the sector, and also we're also looking at mentoring support for current and aspiring leaders in the sector, whatever their leadership role and wherever they are in the sector. So I will explain more about that at the end of the session. So as you said, it's the last of 3 webinars and they will be on the WM website, and again I'll give you some details of that. But today's one is talking about self-doubt and talking about practical tips on dealing with what might be holding you back. And I really hope that this is a much more interactive website, so if people have things that they've done and it's helped them to deal with this, I'd really love to hear from people. So feel free to write stuff in that chat box, and Naomi is going to be looking out for it and waving at me when she's got something interesting. So to move on then. So the inspiration for this was recently came from the publicity surrounding the publication of Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and the media latched on to the fact that in her book she had talked about how she had experienced imposter syndrome. with the inference that how could such a kind of successful, intelligent, educated woman still feel that she wasn't good enough and did not have a rightful place among all the powerful people working and visiting in the White House? And I think that to me kind of really spoke volumes, that this was something that is people, lots of people feel and lots of people experience, and it doesn't matter what your position is in life, that it actually kind of feels very pertinent and very personal to us. So I thought, well, if it's good enough for Michelle Obama to feel like this, then I think it's good enough for us to talk about it in the FE and skills sector. So that's what I want to do, and I also today want to talk to you really about my own personal experience of imposter syndrome and how that felt for me, and to share what it's meant to me. But we've got the first poll here, so I'm just really interested to hear from people in the listening in whether they have ever experienced imposter syndrome. So we have that poll going on. But while that's going on and while we get the results in, so as I said, the webinar, I want to talk about some of the research and evidence based on imposter syndrome, and I'm going to share with you my personal experience of self-doubt and imposter syndrome and what has held me back, and more importantly actually made me feel quite miserable for years, and how I've dealt with that and continue to deal with it. So I'm not going to pretend that I know all the answers. So I'd like, as I said, it to be interactive, so do send in your comments. So do we have any?
Yes, 100% of people with us today experiencing imposter syndrome. I mean, I can relate to that. I think everybody does. So I'm not necessarily surprised by that result.
No, and I guess maybe people listened in because they experienced it. It's interesting that the one piece of research that I did read on it said that actually 70% of people, I guess we're a kind of a fairly targeted audience. So as you said, hardly surprising. But so you're all going to know what I'm talking about, and you're all going to be able to chip in, I hope, with what works for you. So, and as I said, in preparing for this webinar, I thought, actually, no, I don't want to come across as an imposter, obviously. I need to do a bit of research and evidence. And I have shelves at home in my office where I work as I'm a consultant, and I've got some shelves at home, and I've got books on leadership, gender politics, coaching, etc. I thought, I'll just do a quick search of the index, see what we've got in there. And not a single one of them had anything written on imposter syndrome. And I thought that was in itself very telling. So, despite the fact that we have 100 people, 100% of people joining this seminar, everybody I've said I'm doing this said, oh gosh, yeah, I'll listen to that. So it's clearly out there, but it feels right to me that we have a discussion about it. So on that basis, I Googled it, as you do, and this is what came up. So the first time that the term imposter syndrome was coined was by Dr. Pauline Clance and Suzanne Ames back in 1978, and they defined it as high-achieving individuals marked by an inability to internalise their accomplishments and a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. And I thought that that's a kind of a useful, in some ways, definition for to me because of the two elements. One is the inability to internalise your accomplishments, and I think a lot of us do that all the time. We skim through life achieving and fail to kind of notice it for ourselves. And then that persistent fear of being exposed as fraud. And for me, that inability to internalise accomplishments feels like something I constantly struggle with, but the imposter syndrome kind of comes and goes a bit more, and that's much more kind of contextual to the sort of situation. So we'll talk a bit more about that. The other bit that I thought was, is this really just about high-achieving individuals? And I'm not sure it is. I think it actually does apply to everybody. I think where it suddenly becomes a matter of importance is when it's people like Michelle Obama, talk about it, because these things, how can somebody so, intelligent and clever and successful and powerful feel like this? But they do. But I think actually, for all of us, we all feel it. It's just that somehow or other, if you're not one of those high achieving, it's kind of glossed over. So that was the kind of research on it.
We've had an interesting question already from someone called Katina, who's here with us today, who's asked if, in doing your research, were there any kind of detailed demographics in regarding social diversity and imposter syndrome or different occupational sectors? I think, everybody kind of recognises that there are things like gender, ethnicity, age, ability or disability, I think that can amplify that feeling of
Absolutely.
imposter syndrome?
No, I didn't see any particular. Initially, I think when it was coined by Pauline Clance and Susan Ames, they talked about it as being something that women feel and not men, but actually it's now found that actually men feel this. How much more or how much less, I don't know. And maybe it's because women will talk about it more, I don't know, but I haven't seen any research around that. I know there was something recently that came out around black academics experiencing it, but yeah, so I think it is worthy of some exploration, because I think I'll talk a bit more about it in a minute, but the other bit of research around was these 5 imposters and 5 types of imposter syndrome, and I'm not really a great one for this kind of like fit yourself into a category, but I do think sometimes when you listen to it you see yourself and you can see certain behaviours, and you have to recognise that you may be fit across several, or whatever. So we have the perfectionist, someone who sets excessively high goals for themselves, and when they don't reach that they feel that they failed, and whatever they succeed it's never good enough. We have the superwoman or superman, which is convinced that they're phonies among real colleagues, and so they push themselves to work harder, to measure up, stay later at work, etc., and they never believe that they have earned that title that they have got. The natural genius, which is somehow believing that you must be a natural genius at what you're doing, so you'll judge yourself on the ease and speed of which you do things, rather than kind of on the effort. So it's if you struggle with something, then you feel ashamed and you blame yourself because you're not a real person. The soloist, which is that you feel that if you ask for help, you will reveal yourself as a phony and a fake and an imposter. So as you struggle, you feel shame for asking for help. And then we have the expert, which is believing that you never know enough, and that you will never be able to talk about something or do something as well as anybody else, because you just don't know this piece of information or that piece of knowledge, whatever. So people like that will shy away, for instance, for applying for jobs, because they can't do everything on the job description and the job spec, because they know. So it's constantly seeking to train and retrain and gain knowledge. So as I said, I think, although I'm not a big fan of these sort of things, when I read it, I did kind of think, I think I fit into some of those, and I could see myself reflected back in that. So it kind of helps you to think, well, actually, maybe I'm not so alone with this. And having said that, there wasn't much reference about it, and you get these coincidences, don't you? That there's an article written by Lou Mycroft called Dancing Matildas that has actually been on the WLN Twitter feed today. And what Lou talks about is imposter syndrome as something that comes from within, not from within, but from without. So although they talk about these categories, I think it's really important to acknowledge that actually some of these things aren't inherent characteristics in us. They're not our failings. They come from the kind of pressures and things that come from out. So, for instance, perfectionism is obviously clearly a difficult one for a lot of people in a sector whereby the strive to be outstanding is so important, and the not being outstanding and the being required improvement and adequate has such kind of like negative and blaming and awful consequences. So I think that's an interesting take on that, and I think it's remembering that this is kind of contextual, and it's not about us as failures. Okay. So I want to go on now and I've talked about the evidence. Sorry, I'm not on my right slide. Sorry. Okay, so this is my story of imposter syndrome. So when I was in my 30s, which is obviously quite a long time ago now, I was a working parent. I had one young child, and I was working full time, and there was no affordable childcare, so I had to set up a parent-run nursery, no family around. So clearly I was working very hard and very stressed. And lots of other things happened, like some bereavements, and we not just moved house, we moved city. I got a new job, and before I got the new job, I got pregnant. So I was in my job for about 4 months. I had to take maternity leave, and then I had to take maternity leave. So quite a stressful thing to deal with. And then my second child, lovely child, beautiful boy, but he never slept for more than an hour and a half at a time until he was 14 months old. And I went back to work at 6 months, so I was sleep deprived. And about that time that I went back to work and was clearly extremely sleep deprived, and I began to think that I was completely useless at my job. Okay, no evidence that I was useless at my job, but I believed that I was useless, and actually believed that I was so useless that my colleagues didn't have the heart to tell me how useless I was. So that actually, this is all sounding really bizarre now, but anyway, that actually what they would do is they would wait until I went on holiday, and then they would move the office, so that when I came back from holiday, I wouldn't be able to find them. So this is, I would spend...
I've had that bit.
I'm not alone. So I would spend my holidays thinking of the logistics of how they could move an office in 2 weeks. And I suppose the positive side of this is that actually if I needed a job in moving offices, I would actually be warmed up and I would be really good at it. But coming back to work was horrible because you would drive up and you kind of think, are they going to be there? Is the sign still there? Yeah, the sign's still there. Oh, there's cars in the car park, they must be there. Have they changed the locks? And maybe I'll knock on the door and can't get in anymore. So I had this belief of being so useless that I was about to be sacked off and on for about 18 years. Yeah. Sometimes it would manifest itself, so when I worked at a different employer, if I got this is back in the days when you had pay slips rather than electronically done, but if I had a letter that wasn't my pay slip, I immediately assumed it was my P45. Stopped me engaging with kind of senior leadership because I suddenly thought, well, if I remind them that I'm here, it will remind them to sack me. So I would do all kinds of bizarre behaviours, and as I said, this went on for about 18 years. And then it just so happened that one day I was sitting down working with a colleague, and ironically I was doing some work on mental health, and I said to this colleague, but I always think I'm about to be sacked. And it was just a throwaway comment. I hadn't really ever talked about it. And he said, but that's mad. And then he said, Kathryn, actually, I mean that in a clinical sense. That is mad. And it sounds like anxiety and depression. Now, if you'd have said to me then, oh, have you anxiety and depression, I would have said no. But I could recognise, actually, I had had it then, that being sleep deprived, coming back to work after maternity, I was very vulnerable, really, and was very stressed and had anxiety and depression, and this had lingered for that amount of time. And it was one of those light bulb moments for me where I suddenly thought, actually, this isn't true, is it? I'm not about to be sacked. Loads of evidence I was never about to be sacked anyway, and I kind of knew that. So it's a kind of slightly bizarre self-obsession, isn't it? So, and the reason that I suppose I wanted to say that to you is because, you know, it does have a kind of slightly ridiculous side to it and slightly bizarre, but also actually for me it has been a mental health and well-being issue, and I think that's also one of the things I think we need to acknowledge.
Because you can think that it's, I mean, when you say it out loud, sometimes you can recognise how ridiculous it is by how other people react to it, but actually when it's in your head, it never feels ridiculous. It feels like it makes complete sense. There's actually the only thing, well, of course, they're going to sack me, and of course, the only way to do that is to move offices.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. To me, it was totally real. But on the one hand, I could always sometimes kind of say, but actually, I did this well, or I did that well, but I couldn't ever internalise that enough to buffer these other ridiculous thoughts. So it kind of led me to think that I think this is actually about a continuum. And you know, if we talk about mental health as being part of that continuation, isn't it? We all have a range of emotions, and it's when it becomes distressing and debilitating, and it was for me distressing. I have spent hours in the middle of the night agonising over this, and you know. So I think you need to seek help, and that's what I would say to some people. If this is something that is distressing, then it is important, I think, to get some professional support. At the other end of the spectrum, I think, is that self-doubt, as I said, is a normal human emotion, like sadness and anger, and we need those emotions. They are important emotions. at one end it's quite a healthy thing, and I think for our work, I think self-doubt is sometimes healthy. It stops and makes you think. It makes you think about how you can do something better. It makes you think about whether you need to kind of ask for help. And, you know, in some ways, actually, if we had a bit more self-doubting in this world, it might be a safer place at the moment. So I think it is a spectrum. And the bit that I suppose I wanted to talk about today is that bit in the middle, which is it's about how you manage it. You know, you might not need professional help. It's not enough to kind of make you spur you on. It is still hampering you and making you miserable. And that's the bit that I think we need to kind of share tips and techniques. And going back to the point, you know, that in Lou's article is about it's contextual, you know, situational. Some of that self-managing were about recognising what's going on around you, and is that the things that are making you vulnerable to this. So that's the kind of bit that I wanted to say there. Okay, so moving on, I now want to share with you my 6 ways or things that I have done to get over this, because by and large, you'll be happy to know that I don't think I'm about to be sacked. I'm self-employed, so it will be hard, but anyway, I'm not going to sack myself. So again, do share with me if you've got anybody who's coming back with any tips and techniques and strategies. That would be really good. So, okay. So my first one is about stop asking why, but actually think about what you do about it. And this piece of advice actually came from a friend of mine, actually, who also had anxiety and depression, and was her GP didn't give her medication. She sent her on a course to do something about it, and she said that on her course, what she learned wasn't that they said to her is that life is like being in a little boat, okay, in the middle of the ocean, and we bob along on this little boat, and hopefully reaching where we need to get to. Hopefully even enjoying the experience and admiring the view, etc. But sometimes life can be a bit turbulent and a bit stormy, and you get thrown out of the boat and you get into the cold and hostile water. The important thing there is not to expend your energy thinking about why am I in the water, but use your energy to get back in the boat and stay in the boat. And it just struck me when she told me the amount of energy I had wasted wondering why I felt like this. Where does it come from, Kathryn? Why do you feel like this? Is it something, you know, in your background? Is it something, you know, blah, 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 blah. And actually, I should have spent probably 18 years before I really, you know, thinking, just expend your energy on thinking about how you get back in that boat and how do you stay there. So it's about that kind of, how do I keep myself well? And so that's my first one, is stop asking yourself why and just think about what you can do about it. So my next one is sleep. That's probably what I look like plus 50 years, by the way, but anyway, when I'm sleeping. Sleep, for me, is a massive, big trigger. And I think it's probably no coincidence that this all started for me when I was sleep deprived. And I know now that if I don't have a couple of good nights sleep, immediately I get those thoughts of, nobody likes me, I'm really crap at my job, I can't do this and I can't do that. And the trick I have now realised is to say, it's not that, it's that you're tired, and you will feel better when you've had a good night's sleep. Yeah. So that, for me, is something which is absolutely key, and it's about that realising, isn't it, that those thoughts, and we'll say this probably again and again, those thoughts of I'm rubbish are not objective truths, rather, they're not objective truth, they are subjective feelings, and for me, tiredness will do that. And it's that other realising, if I was sleeping well last week and felt okay, why have I suddenly become crap and useless? And it's not that I have, it's just I'm just not sleeping. So I think that's it. But you know, I'd be really interested to hear what other people, whether it's sleep or whether it's other self-care or.
Yeah, so for everyone that's here with us today, if you have anything that you recognise as a trigger to you feeling this way, or you've developed any of your own kind of coping strategies, do feel free to share them in the box underneath the presentation, and we'll share those. But I think the sleep one's a good one. I really, really recognise that in myself, actually, and I think sometimes it's good to remember that when if it's late at night and I could quite easily stay up for hours thinking and dissecting about my last 24 hours at work. And I think something I've done for myself is say, well, how about I try going to sleep now, and if I'm still sure that I'm going to be sacked in the morning, which, by the way, I recognise is a completely external factor because where I work, if anyone's concerned, is very supportive, then I'll say, I'll deal with it in the morning. So just trying to shelve that thought until the morning. And I often find that when I wake up in the morning, I'm just not, if I've had 8 hours of sleep, suddenly all that paranoia has just evaporated.
Yes, I think that's very, very true, because the other thing is that the more you worry about it, the less you sleep. The more you worry about it, so it's kind of like this awful vicious circle, isn't it? So it's about stopping it and saying, I will sleep. Yes, there's one of the things, if I move on, is the next thing is, I have to have a word with myself. So one of my things about sleeping is that if I am lying awake, fretting about something, my question to myself is, Kathryn, are you prepared to get out of this warm bed, go downstairs and do whatever it is you need to do to make this right, or not? And the answer invariably is no. I think I'll say here, well, in that case, stop fretting, go back to sleep, you will be better in the morning. So I think that for me, that whole sleep thing is key, but it's also about how I self-talk, and I think that how we have those internal monologues are really key to me, that they're so when I start to do the kind of, nobody likes you, you're really rubbish, you're never going to get any more work again, etc., as I do, I kind of have this vision in my head that it's like a little switch, and I can switch it off, stop it, switch it off. So I do, that is just stop it, because it is just not helpful. Turn that switch off. On the other hand, I've also got a switch which I would call my kind switch, and I will put that on. Now you can't have both on at the same time. You've got to make a choice, and my choice obviously is, and I think this really helps, is to make that positive choice. Put the switch on, which is about being kind to yourself. I have had in the past some coaching, and one of the techniques that they use in coaching is that you do this self-talk when you tell yourself how wonderful you are and how amazing you are and what a wonderful, strong woman you are. That doesn't work for me. I find it just makes me scared, because I kind of think it's like setting myself up. Those high expectations. It's like that perfection thing, isn't it? So I'm quite happy with self-talk which says, you're okay, you're doing all right, it's okay, you do good enough, you're trying your best. And that to me feels a lot safer, a lot more authentic, and certainly actually much more attainable and healthier. And it just doesn't come with that big stress like, oh my God, I've got to be amazing and I've got to be wonderful. So I think that's a big thing for me, is just give yourself a kind of, it's okay, you're okay. The other one is, and I've sort of stopped making it about myself and rephrasing and reframing things, is about when we're asked to do things, it suddenly becomes all about us, and it becomes a burden on us, or something only we can do. And I've tried to kind of help myself reframe that by actually thinking about it as maybe there's a more external good from doing this. So actually, doing this webinar is probably quite a good example of that. So I would have, I think, in the past have said, oh my God, I've got to do this webinar. Oh my God, I've got to be the expert on imposter syndrome. Oh, I don't know enough about it. Why will people want to listen to me? I have got nothing to say about this. It's blah, 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 blah. And actually rephrasing it and reframing it to say, actually, I think imposter syndrome is something that is worthy of a discussion. I think I have something to contribute to the discussion, but I also think other people do. And so it becomes something that you put out there to collaborate and share, and it just becomes a much more comfortable and safer thing to do. It isn't about me having to achieve, it isn't about me having to have these, it's about, there is a kind of more, what's the word I'm looking for, Naomi? but it's a much more external thing. It's not about me, you're putting it out there, and that's safer. So that to me also feels like, as part of the self-talk, apart from it's okay, it's actually, I just want to share this and I want to learn from other people and I hope that I've got something to share. And that takes just a lot of pressure off, doesn't it? You're not setting yourself up to fail, you're just putting it out there.
Yeah, because I think I have traits of feeling like, my work that I gave in had to be completely perfect, and that could make deadlines quite stressful because I'm trying to achieve the impossible within a limited amount of time. And I think, there's kind of two things I do, which is when I have this kind of internal monologue, if I wouldn't talk to my friends like that, I shouldn't be talking to myself like that. I think that's a good one. Somebody told me that once. So I imagine my friend standing in front of me, and would I be calling her stupid and safe to sales? Probably not, no, because that's rude. So I shouldn't be talking to myself like that. And I think the other thing is also, so I had an experience in a job before, which was completely the wrong job for me, and was also going under a huge amount of personal pressure at the time, and had a manager who was very critical. And I think there were multiple factors there, so I had quite severe imposter syndrome, didn't think that I should deserve that job, even though I could do it. But I think because then I was very stressed, it then led me to making mistakes.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like this self-fulfilling prophecy where I was like, well, I'm not good enough to be here, and now I'm making mistakes and that's proving that I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And so I think a large part of as I've kind of gone on through jobs is I've tried to learn that making mistakes is okay.
Yeah.
So it's not even about, for me, being the best or okay is enough. Is also sometimes you're going to do things wrong.
Yeah.
So, wrong is subjective, but you're gonna make spelling mistakes, or you're going to put a document together and somebody's going to say to you, actually that's not what I was asking for, or I don't agree with your proposal, and that's okay. Because leaders make mistakes all the time, Prime Ministers make mistakes all the time, so I'm sure I can in my position.
We've got another poll, haven't we? But I think you've raised some really good things, and actually I think one of the things you said is talk to yourself like your own best friend. Like you say, if you wouldn't even talk to an acquaintance in the way that we sometimes talk to ourselves, so we shouldn't do that. And I think you're absolutely right. It's just acknowledging that it's okay to make a mistake, and actually nobody's going to die. We're not cardiac surgeons, are we? So and actually, it's that learning from that, isn't it? It's an important thing.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got another poll here, and what I'll do is I'll ask that now. So do you make a conscious effort to modify or change your self-talk? So do go ahead and click yes or no. That should be on your screen. And while you're doing that, I can also see, so we've had 2 more responses, I think, that were really good. So Rachel, who's a curriculum area manager, says go for a walk or have a break from office, computer, or other people, change of scene during the day. And funnily enough, so Lou Mycroft is actually here watching.
Hello, Lou.
Hi, Lou. So glad you've met the Dancing Matildas. And again said, if I can make myself, and I often can't, doing something physical can help. Sometimes that means dancing along, just put a song in there. And what's underneath imposter syndrome is shame, and Brené Brown is brilliant on this. I can second that. Brené Brown is a brilliant speaker. She talks about the importance of vulnerability. And funnily enough, I listened to that when I was learning to be able to make mistakes at work, and how that's a positive thing to be publicly vulnerable. So so that's Brené, B-R-E-N-E, Brown. She's done a number of TED Talks as well, so I recommend that in people's spare time, if they haven't seen her already, that they do go have a listen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting about the physical activity, isn't it? Because sometimes it is just a walk out at lunchtime, isn't it? And a bit of fresh air, or Lou does some dancing, just put some music. So
the majority of people here, so about 63%, they do modify their self-talk, but 36% of those people said they don't. So maybe that's whether because they don't feel like they need to, or actually maybe they haven't thought about doing that before. So I think that's quite a powerful thing, actually, to change the way you're talking about yourself.
Yeah, and just turn down the volume on some of the internal monologue and turn up the volume on other bits. So be interesting to those people who haven't, is whether they feel they don't or just haven't thought about it and realise that they're doing it even.
Yeah. And Lou just added again and said, by the way, the song is Shame, Shame, Shame by Shirley and the Company from the film Pride, which is a very heartwarming film. If anyone's having a bad day, I highly recommend watching it. So, I'm glad we know what that is now. Thank you, Lou.
Brilliant. Okay. Yes, keep the comments coming in. It's really great to hear. Okay. So my fourth one is that sudden realisation that it really isn't about me, always about me. So again, one of those light bulb moments. So I haven't always believed that I'm about to be sacked, although there's been the kind of continuum of it, as I said. So obviously, clearly, in one of my better moments, I actually went for a job internally in an organisation, and I didn't get it, but the CEO said to me, we really value you, and we want to talk to you about what else we can do for you and how can we develop you. So we made an agreement to meet a week after that. He'd said that to me. But in that week, I got a massive kind of imposter syndrome car crash where I'm about to be sacked. I'm going to turn up and he's going to sack me. And then had one of those moments you kind of thought, but I haven't done anything. That would actually justify that. So this is, again, in my head, only in my head, it's not in his head. As far as he's probably concerned, he's had the conversation, he's parked that, he's getting on with his life, he's getting on with his job, he's too busy to think about me. I am not the centre of, and my uselessness is not the centre of his universe. And so it was that kind of moment, it's like, oh no, he's probably not even thought about it. So I think there was something for me, is about that realisation that it's a kind of like an inverted arrogance, really, isn't it? It's a kind of bizarre way of looking, thinking about the world. So that was really helpful for me, and this is just a book that I was reading, The Confidence Code. The other thing I think is that, people are busy, and, they are getting on with their lives. They really don't have that much time, and they're not actually noticing. And sometimes I think some of the problem is that people aren't noticing when you're struggling. So I think that for me, it's always been quite helpful to then think, well, actually, are people struggling? And think, well, actually, can I help? And could somebody do with some kind words, kind thoughts, a bit of support, etc., some practical help? So there's a kind of stop making it about you. You're not the centre of your uselessness, is not the centre of the universe, but actually also appreciate that other people are probably, well, as we know, other people are struggling with it all the time, and we see them as fantastic, doing great things, going along, but actually, who knows what's going on under the surface. So.
A psychology teacher, actually, which really stuck with me as a teenager, gave me an analogy, gave the class an analogy, but she said, when you're driving a car, you can see every single movement that you've done to turn the car, and everything it takes in order to be able to do a movement in the car. But for anyone outside of the car, all they see is the car move, and they have no idea what you've gone through. But you could be screaming while you're turning the car, and they couldn't know about it. So I think that's good about realising that all the work that you see that's going on in your head, you can kind of assume that people might recognise that you're struggling, and actually they might not know at all.
They have no idea. And likewise, you don't see everything that they're doing, so it's a two-way thing, isn't it, really? And I think, for me, this kind of feels also really important, because I think that we work under a lot of pressure a lot of the time, and we're working, if you're a manager and you've got staff, or if you're just working with your colleagues, I think it's really important to recognise that not just what goes on at work, but what goes on in other people around their lives, it can be really stressful and make people quite vulnerable. So, don't just kind of take that kind of what appears to be functioning and ease for granted. That it's kind of really important to do that. And particularly, I think, as I said, there are stressful times for people, whether they're returning to work from maternity leave, or they've got caring responsibilities, or your organisation's going through a restructuring, or redundancies. All of those things, I think, are the things that make us kind of quite vulnerable. Okay, so my fifth one is about if imposter syndrome, I think, and self-doubt hold you back. I'm sorry, that's me, I keep forgetting to press the button, sorry. So the other one is stop worrying, just do it. And for me, it's about realisation of how much I didn't do stuff because I thought I couldn't, and thought I would be a phony. And it's about I think the more that you do, and particularly that learning to kind of internalise it and know what you're doing, will build the confidence, and it's the best kind of buffer against that kind of, imposter syndrome and self-doubt. It kind of moves you further towards that continuum. So I think, it's recognising that self-doubt is okay. It's all right. It's making you stop, and it's making you reflect, and it's making you think about, how can I do this well? How can I do my best on this? So you're not taking wild risks and things like that. I think it's also about you can practice stuff and you can observe things, and you break it down into kind of small steps, so it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming. We have started doing, the WLN has started doing podcasts, and Kathryn from Ethic Week has just done the first one on women speaking up and women using social media. And I thought she had a fantastic piece of advice, which is, if you want to do that, but you are anxious about it and worried and don't know that you've got, the sort of things that we all say to us, I've got nothing to say, I've got no opinion, blah, blah, blah. She said, observe people doing it and watch how they do it, and begin to kind of, if you see a style and a way that people do it, begin to emulate that. And I just thought that was such a fantastic piece of advice, because we have so many great kind of role models around that it's really helpful sometimes to kind of think, what would so-and-so do about it? It's kind of, besides the switches in my head, I also have my little fantasy team in my head. So I have people that I admire, and I think they do a really great job. And, in certain situations, I might think, so Pauline, who's done the webinars with me, there's often times I think, what would Pauline say then? Because she's such a kind and positive person. I kind of stop this negativity. What would Pauline say? And so I think that's kind of, observe and, and emulate, and look to kind of some role models and say, actually, this is how I can be. The other bit is a kind of breaking down of the tasks. As a consultant, we'll get pieces of work, we all get, kind of projects, and you can feel overwhelmed, and I don't know where to start. Well, start with step one. You give yourself, well, if that doesn't work, then I can always say I can't do it. But actually just start one step at a time, and if one goes well, do two goes well, do three, and do that. And I think, the last one is that be authentic. Just say, I'm doing my best. I'm okay. This is okay. This is my assignment's okay. I can hand it in, etc. So it's those sort of things. I think for me is kind of get over the self-doubt and just deal with it. Be brave. Sometimes fear is the worst barrier, isn't it? Once you actually do something, actually it wasn't scary. I was just scared of being scared, So
there's that saying, isn't there? How do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite.
One mouthful at a time. Yeah, and that's what you need to do. So my last one is about learning to ask for help, and I think it is about that. There is no shame in not being able to do something, not being able to understand something, not knowing something, because actually, for what you don't know, you know loads, don't you? And I think it is not to see it as help, as in your you are maybe some vulnerability, but actually ask for help, which is because you want other ideas, you want to bring in different perspectives to something, and that makes your work better and stronger. And actually, people like being asked, don't they? By and large, people like to be consulted because it makes them feel valued, it makes them feel like they know what they're talking about, and that in itself is really, I think, good for other people's confidence. So I think it's a kind of quite a nice giving thing to say, I'd like to pick your brains on this, or could you just talk to me about this? So people like that, I think, as I said, it brings in more voices and more ideas and more diversity. The other bit is about, and I think this is important, is about your network. We talked in the first webinar about the different kinds of networks, and you have your bonding networks, and those are the people that you look to for your support, and you have your bridging networks, the people that will give you that diverse thinking, or give you kind of contacts and help you out. And I think it's about understanding what kind of help you need. So if you're doubting something, and you might want to go to a good friend who can say, actually, you've done that fine, or you've done it before, what about when you did it like this, reminding you of what you've done. And then sometimes it's the bridging network where you might seek out somebody to say, I don't understand about this, could you just talk to me a bit about it? So, there's a kind of a different network. And The other thing I think is, and this is about, again, the kind of self-care, is actually find people you like to work with and they like to work with you. And I think it never fails to amaze me how kind of energised you can be from that kind of network. And it kind of, I don't want to make it sound like, we all live in this golden gilded life where everything is wonderful, because quite frankly, sometimes you have to work with people that you don't particularly get on with, or you work in situations where it's very challenging and it can be very jarring. But actually, there are always opportunities, I think, to carve out some spaces where you can, be with people and do stuff that you love and that you can feel excited and energised by. And that goes a long way, doesn't it, to keeping you on a kind of an upbeat and towards the other end of the continuum, rather than down to the more distressing end. So that's my 6 tips. So I don't know if there's any other kind of questions or...
Yes, so someone's asked a question here actually. Anna, she's also a curriculum manager, says, if one is making an effort to avoid imposter syndrome and so being confident and positive, how do we avoid going so far as becoming arrogant and making mistakes? Are we anxious for a reason? Well, we are anxious for a reason, aren't we?
Yeah, I guess that's what I was saying, that I don't think it's about eradicating self-doubt, because it's about saying that is okay to sometimes say, and even when you're confident, I think it's kind of the blurred things, aren't they? So even when you're confident, it's also sometimes confident to say, Kathryn, do you know what you're talking about? Where could this be better? How could you do this? So there's also a confidence to own, isn't it, your own kind of limitations. It's not blind confidence that you're just amazing and good at everything, because nobody is, and that's about accepting us in all of our kind of, warts and all, as well as all our glory. But I think it's about saying that is fine, as long as you deal with it and put it where it is and move on.
Yeah, I think if it's preventing you from doing anything in your job, holding you back, that's when it becomes something that's really difficult. I think something that you talked about in a previous webinar that I think would be really useful for anyone that didn't hear those, talked about keeping track of the positive things people say. So, because I think obviously when you're experiencing these feelings that you don't belong at work, and then somebody will say one thing to you, and I've even had to go back and read emails, which what I've later have realised is something that's constructive and helpful. I've read and initially been like, well, great, that obviously means I'm terrible at my job, and they obviously hate me, and I'm obviously going to get fired. And it's so easy to remember those things, or the moments that made you feel bad, and so easy to forget the kind of good comments, the things that you take for throwaway, where people say, oh, thanks for doing that, I really liked that piece of work. So Kathryn got advised in the past, and I've actually keep a little bit of a diary, write down all the good comments that you get, everything constructive you receive, always keep note of them, because then when you have a bad day, you can go back and you've got this whole log of positive things that help you reflect.
Absolutely. I was thinking about this when I was thinking about this thing. It's about, the internalising your accomplishments. And that's actually the bit that I'm not so good at, because it's a bit like, I have a slightly dodgy back, and I ought to do more exercise, but I don't. I wait till my back gets bad, I think I'll do some exercise, and then back it goes, so I think I'll stop now. And I'm a bit like that with the kind of positivity thing. Yeah, I'm okay, I do that, that's fine. But it's that kind of like recognising how you do that. And it's the other thing I think is, so the keeping a log. So I do have emails that people have sent to me, or testimonies. Through some coaching that I've done, I've also, coaches maybe go to people and ask for their feedback. And that's been really helpful, because I think that the helpful way to do that is not to say, give me some positive feedback, because they'll all say, well, you're wonderful, amazing, etc. And that actually isn't helpful. What I've asked for at times is kind of, when did you see me at my best? What did I do? And they will give you a situation that has happened, and I won't have seen, how I was in that situation, but their feedback makes me think, oh, actually, so it's based in it's an evidence base, I guess, to it. So I think there is asking for feedback. And the other thing I think is really important is, and I've had to kind of again learn to do this, is when people give you positive feedback, really accept it. I'm a very, well, they would say that, you know, or, oh, well, and almost I think it's a sign of disrespect that is like, that, well, they don't really mean it, do they? No, people do. They've taken time to say it, they've taken time to think about it, give it the respect it's due, and accept it as they meant it, and believe it. And that kind of helps to internalise, but also keep it, because it's very easy just to forget, isn't it? So have that little logbook. Yeah.
Okay, so there's no more questions for everyone.
No? Okay. Well, I just wanted to before we move on, just to talk a bit more about what WLN is doing. Oh.
There we go.
Anyway, sorry, on the right side. So as I said, we're working, relaunching WLN, exciting times for us. We've done these series of webinars now, and my colleagues have been doing some events, inclusive mentoring events, but we've got a CPD event coming up on March the 28th at the City of Westminster College on inclusive mentoring, and that's all about, it's about your network actually, it's about what I talked about, it's about building your bonding and your bridging network, but it kind of flips that notion that a mentor, you seek out a mentor who's more experienced, more, you know, has higher status than you, to actually say that we can all learn from different perspectives and that anybody can be a mentor as well as a mentee. And it's about understanding that even when you're very experienced in one thing, you may need to talk to somebody from a different perspective, somebody who's younger, somebody who's from a different culture, somebody who doesn't look like you, and learn from that. So that's what we're looking at inclusive mentoring. We're doing another online networking event on the 2nd of April with FE Associates, who are a recruitment agency in the sector. So if you want to come along and talk and hear people talk about the kind of process of recruitment and what people are looking for and how you go through that process, and, you know, if you're looking for your next step and your next job, that would be a useful one. So it will be a kind of webinar type thing like this, so you can sit at home and do that. We have our podcasts, which I think are so exciting. So we've had the first one, it's hashtag FE Women's Weekly. So if you're old enough and remember Women's Weekly, it's a bit of a pun on that, thanks to Katie Shaw. But Kath Murray did one, hoping Katie Shaw's one will come out, which is the importance of women supporting women. And there will be some other ones. Mel Lenahan talking about inclusive leadership. We've got ones coming up on ethical leadership and other ones for younger women, some on well-being, some on intersectionality. So I think that's really interesting. You can also join us as a founding partner. Your organisation can, or as an individual, and that's on our website, www.WLNFE.org.uk/partners to become a partner, but the bit about the partners will take you to the website, and that's where the webinars will be when we upload them. Or just get in touch if you're interested, you've got a question, and that's what we're doing. And sorry, going back to mentoring, what we want to do is actually set up a mentoring network, so we really want people to be involved, and the whole point of being founding partners is to have that kind of discussion about what gender equality means in the sector for us. So yeah, exciting times, and yeah, it'd be lovely to hear from people.
Yeah, that would be great. So yeah, please do get in touch with Kathryn, everybody who's interested. In line with that, if you are a SET member, we do have our local network groups across the country. We've got about 10 to 12 groups now, and they're practitioners all across further education who meet. Usually they have about 2 to 3 meetings a year on a weekday evening, and they're kind of member-led, so practitioners will kind of run speaking sessions or workshops, and they're a great way to meet people in your local area. But if you're interested in kind of that mentoring network with WLN, SET members also can access an online mentoring program for free. So that's a very introductory course to mentoring, and that's quite useful, I think, because people have very different ideas about what mentoring is, and you want to make sure you've all got the same kind of foundational knowledge. And that takes about 10 hours to complete in total. You get a certificate at the end of that as well. I think that's a positive thing, because funnily enough, even though you're here today because you're talking about imposter syndrome, I think one of the best ways to build your confidence and to realise what you have to give is actually to mentor somebody else.
Absolutely.
And doing a mentoring programme and then kind of participating in that network is a great way to recognise that and build some kind of self-esteem.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn as much being a mentor as you do being a mentee, so it's it's a much more balanced peer-to-peer and so yeah, it's get involved. Great. Thank you very much.
So thank you again to everyone who's still with us. So all of you who have registered, again, will receive that link so you can catch up with us anytime, and do share it with your peers if there's anybody who's struggling and you think it might be useful, and get in touch through the usual channels if you have any queries. We look forward to seeing you at a webinar again in future.